This week on Open Record, they trusted a local business with heirloom pianos.
In my viewpoint, this goes well beyond being bad at your job or even negligence.
Years later, they're wondering what's happened to their treasured instruments.
They hold a lot of sentimental value for people. Why would you refurnish a piano if you didn't care about it?
And an 83-year-old woman declared dead, but very much alive.
It was just such a shock, and then she's like, what's going on?
How Contact 6 helped revive her vital status with Social Security.
I could not have done this without you guys.
From the FOX6 studios, this is Open Record. I'm Brian Polson, joined here by Open Record's executive producer, Sarah Smith. Hello, Sarah.
Hello.
And we are joined by Contact 6 reporter, Jenna Sachs. Hello, Jenna.
Hi.
We are recording this episode on Wednesday, July 2nd, and we apparently all decided to be patriotic with our colors accidentally, but here we are. We are going to talk about a couple of consumer problems brought to Contact 6 that were also deeply personal. In one case, a woman sent her sole inheritance from her grandparents, an heirloom piano, to a shop to be repaired. She still doesn't know what happened to it or if she will ever get it back. In the other story, a woman lost her husband of 62 years. Then she learned the government, well, they declared her dead too. We're going to dive into those stories when we return on Open Record.
All right, we are back on Open Record. 2 people wrote to Contact 6 this year with the same unusual request. They needed help getting their antique pianos back from a local repair business. They said the business stopped responding to calls and emails. The doors were locked. So, Jenna, you reported on this business once before, back in 2017. Why another one?
You know, we've considered returning to this story a couple of times since then. People have written to us saying they were having issues with pianos, but they didn't want to go on camera. Our first story was back in 2017, and we spoke with a woman named Karen Fields who lives in Shorewood, and she had this player piano that was a favorite of her late husband. It sat in their living room, and it suffered water damage when there was a leak in the ceiling. So she brought it to Newhouse Piano Workshop for repairs in 2014, and at the time she reached out to us, she'd been waiting 3 years for her piano. And back then, this business had an A+ rating with the BBB, and the owner of this piano workshop was very transparent with us. He welcomed us into the shop. He showed us the piano. He showed us how he couldn't get it to play. He couldn't make this repair on his own. So he said he was going to ship this playing mechanism out of state to another expert who would try to make the repair instead of him. And that was kind of the end of the story at that point. But we found out a couple years later that that action wasn't taken, and we wanted to do a follow-up story. We had an interview scheduled with the business owner again, and then shortly before that happened, he told police that he was attacked in his shop, like a burglary of some sort was reported, and that he had suffered a head injury. And he communicated that to me, and it kind of died off at that point because I didn't want to interview someone who had a head injury. But as the years went by, more information came to light, more of a pattern was established. The BBB rating dropped, and West Dallas police had incident reports of complaints to them. There were more small claims cases as well, and this pattern was established. And then finally this year, we had 2 people reach out to us in a short period of time who were willing to go on camera, so we were able to revisit this.
When I think about a lot of the things that Contact 6 does, they're not always these high-ticket items, but these are expensive items. So you're taking a musical instrument in for repair. It's not like there's a Pianos R Us on every corner. So finding a shop that's local that you can physically get a huge piano. These are not easy to move.
Yeah, it's not dropping off a shirt at a dry cleaner or
you
something.
don't throw this in the Prius. Like, you've got to find a way to get it there. So these are, it's a substantial thing. I would imagine in a case like this, people are looking to go, first of all, where is there a piano shop, and where is there a trusted piano shop? And as you mentioned, going back to your story in 2017, this was a place that had a decades-long reputation as being this really great local place to go.
It did have a good reputation for a long time. And you're right, you cannot find a piano repair workshop on every corner. Often you have to turn out of state for this kind of thing. But Newhouse Piano Workshop was founded by Tom Newhouse's dad. His name was Arnold. He founded it in the 1950s, and it was a successful business. We said it had that A+ rating with the BBB. When Arnold Newhouse died in 2016, there was a very nice write-up about him in the Journal Sentinel, and it seems to correlate with his passing that the business started to struggle.
Well, you said 2016, he dies 2017. You're
I
doing
did my
the story.
first story. And a lot of these issues that we're seeing in police reports and to the courts started after that time period or around that time where his son took over. So we don't know if it's a lack of organization or a lack of skill or if something else happened or if this business is just a dying business model. But those issues started to arise after his father's passing. But as you mentioned, these are expensive items. Not only the value of the pianos is often high, but the repair costs are high. And in all of these cases, people had paid thousands of dollars up front. In Karen Field's case, she paid $10,000 up front to repair these items because the sentimental value is
sentimental.
also
Yeah,
there.
absolutely.
Every
You
person I interviewed had a story about
Yes.
this was my parents' piano or my grandparents'
Because
piano.
those are passed down things. This isn't just like a sweater or something that's of
a big
minimal
item.
value. It's a big item that has.
You think of how moving music is to begin
Yes,
with.
yes.
Then music that has a family connection that
totally.
goes back to lost loved ones. In your story, and I'm sorry, what was her name again?
Which one?
The most recent.
The most recent, Cassie.
Cassie. When in your story, she got obviously emotional thinking about how she'd been asked, why don't you play anymore?
Yeah, that was her grandfather asked her that.
And then she says, well, let's go get this thing fixed so I can
Right.
play again, right?
Cassie had a wonderful story. She grew up in, I think, the Waukesha area, and her grandparents were very involved in her life. And she has this wonderful memory of going with her grandma to a piano warehouse and playing every single piano there and picking out the one that she liked the most. And she really liked the sound of this particular instrument, and she loved playing it. She played it every day after school as a kid. But after her grandmother died, her grandfather got dementia, and he just couldn't take care of the piano. He neglected it. Items piled up on top of it. It got dinks and scratches all over the piano. And he had asked her, why aren't you playing it anymore? And she said he was sad. He missed the piano. So the family decided to invest in repairing this instrument. She found a place nearby. She thought that was great. She said Tom Newhouse seemed very knowledgeable and confident about making these repairs. And then this deadline came and passed, and she couldn't get a hold of him. There was no communication back. The doors were locked, the website's down, and she just wasn't getting anywhere. And she felt like she'd lost it forever. And then she goes online, and all of a sudden she sees this BBB rating, and she sees the complaints online. She sees the cases in, small claims court, and she thinks, what have I done? And we reached out to Tom Newhouse on her behalf, and he did not get back to us. He has like an intermediary, a friend named Bill, who will respond to people now. And he was able to help us with another person's case, or at least we hope it's going in that direction.
Like, Bill is calling on his
Bill,
behalf. It's a little,
he said that Tom doesn't speak with customers anymore and that he has a separate job now driving a truck and works on pianos in the evenings. And he said the business suffered during the pandemic, went through some hard times. People weren't buying pianos anymore. But we also know these issues started being reported to us before the pandemic. So it might have exacerbated a problem, but the issues seem to have started before.
That's what I guess stands out to me is you mentioned earlier police involved. It's one thing to have a business that just kind of, the father dies, the business kind of falls apart.
Get a little pokey,
and then, the last few customers who don't get their things on time, maybe there's a civil lawsuit and then the business kind of dies. But he keeps going. Is that, like, I guess the question is, where does this cross over from just a bad, bad business after the father dies into something that's potentially criminal?
Right. We did speak with a lawyer for this story who represented a family who was trying to collect on a judgment. And he felt that it went beyond, being bad at your job or even beyond gross negligence. He felt like this owner of the business should have known that he was taking on more work than he could handle. Because when I spoke with him in 2017, he spoke to me about his father passing and he inheriting all that work and saying, I can't find a lot of people who can do this highly specialized work, yet he continued to take on more work, as we've learned. And you mentioned the police reports. There were 3 reports. One of them was Cassie's, but there were 2 others from people who said, I brought this business a piano for repairs. I paid thousands of dollars. In one case, the person hadn't heard from the business in 4 years. And in the other case, the person hadn't heard from them in over a year. And the police at the time had made a note saying, we advised them this was a civil issue. But the second report, they noted, we looked at CCAP and there appears to be a pattern here. And we do know police, once they got Cassie's report, started an investigation for possible fraud.
And that's where I wonder is where does that cross the line? I know it's always difficult with these because if you're taking on work thinking maybe I can catch up, maybe the next one will help me just get back up, that's one thing. But if you realize there's no way I can do this, but I need cash, let's get a couple more pianos. That's a big difference. Do we know where this was? Was this someone taking on jobs that he never intended to finish or that he just couldn't?
It's hard to know what his intentions are because Tom never responded directly to me for this report. All of my communication was through this friend of his named Bill Valentine, who was speaking to us on his behalf and reaching out to customers on his behalf. So I can't really say what's going on inside his mind. I can say if you go to the shop, it looks closed. I mean, it looks like a business that may have been abandoned. The windows are dirty. You can see dusty pianos inside. It just looks like the business is not well taken care of. And if you look in the windows, there's lots of pianos in there, some of them still in the blankets from traveling. And it doesn't look like it would be an easy place to walk through. There's a lot of stuff in there.
I have so many questions. So Cassie, did she end up ever finding out where her piano is? Does she know?
No. So this intermediary was able to give us some information about another man's piano who was featured in a story we had only on FOX6Now.com and Fox Local. But Cassie has not gotten any information about where her piano is or gotten any updates. So what happened with Cassie's piano, she sent it in for repairs, and the shell of her piano, kind of the exterior, went to this place called CT Refinishing in Muskego. And Tom Newhouse took all the musical components on the inside, and he was supposed to repair those. Now, CT Refinishing let us come there and see the piano. Their work was finished a long time ago. It looks beautiful.
So sort of the physical,
like the legs
parts.
and the sides of the piano, everything you can see on the outside. And Cassie's very happy with the work they've done, but CT Refinishing can't reassemble this piano and put it back together until they get those repaired musical components from Tom, and he is not really responding to people. And one thing I learned from CT Refinishing is these pianos are not like the mass-produced ones today. You can't just take a part from another piano and put it in and make it work. You often have to repair the part that exists already, and if you can't, the piano won't play again, ever.
I know we've got to get to some other things. Last question. Where does this stand now? Like, what's the latest? What's next?
So we're following Cassie's police investigation to see if that leads to any charges being referred to the DA's office. I emailed West Dallas Police to ask if they had any updates to share before this podcast. I did not hear back. I know Karen Fields was interested in speaking with law enforcement as well. There was another gentleman in our story on Fox Local named Don Lamb who was waiting on his piano. I know that after our story aired, he was able to have a family member, because Don lives in Germany, visit the workshop, and they were able to see his piano. It's in pieces, and some of it is
see
finished.
It through the window or something?
No, they actually, Bill
Okay.
arranged a meeting. They met someone who repairs pianos who was employed there, or maybe part-time. I'm not sure what the work status is. And he was told they would finish up these last few things that needed to be done. Don is coming to the U.S. in August, and he said, regardless of whether it's finished or not, I'm going to take it home at that point, whether it's in pieces or not. And he's optimistic about that at this point because he was allowed in the, a family member was allowed in the door to see this piano. Other people have not had that opportunity.
Obviously, before you spend this kind of money, check those BBB ratings and other things, because now there's certainly a sign out there of trouble. We are going to take a break. After this, we're going to talk about an 83-year-old woman who needs the help of Contact 6, or needed the help, to prove to Social Security that she's still alive. She's not dead. Not yet. We'll explain what happened when we come right back. Welcome back to Open Record. A trip to the eye doctor leads to a shock for an 83-year-old Kenosha woman. That's when a staff member walked over and whispered to her daughter, Medicare rejected her mom's payment because Medicare had marked her as deceased. That's right, she was dead. Only she wasn't. That sent her family down a long road that eventually led to Contact 6. Jenna, tell us what happened here.
Yeah, we were contacted by the daughter of Pat Christensen. She's the 83-year-old woman. Her daughter, Rebecca, reached out to us because they were having issues with her mother being declared dead. So after this incident at the eye doctor, they tried to get to the bottom of what happened, and they traced it back to the fact that Pat's husband sadly passed away in late December. And it appears that Social Security marked both of them deceased at the same time, not just her father. And this had a bit of a domino effect for the family. It was not easy to get that answer. Her daughter spent a long time on hold with Social Security, and often she had to have her mother there with her because her mother has to give them permission to speak with her. And they spoke with Social Security after waiting on hold for a long time, were able to get an appointment pretty easily at a Kenosha Social Security office because there was a cancellation. Rebecca brought her mother in. They met with someone, filled out an official form saying, look at her, she's here, she's not dead. They thought that was the end of it.
Yeah, I love that part of the story, but there's this
yeah,
handwritten thing that says she's in the office and she is very much alive.
Right. They thought that would be the end of it. But unfortunately, shortly after, they noticed that her Social Security payments were missing. And so they had to start making those calls again to Social Security, on hold again, talk to someone who said, there must have been a mistake made, I'll fix it. And they thought everything was taken care of because she got a couple more payments. And then in April, they got, at the time they were told the payments were suspended. They didn't know why that had happened after she had visited the office in person, but it did. And then in April, the payments stopped again, and they kind of threw their hands up and said, we're writing to Contact 6 because we don't understand why this is still happening.
I really found it interesting in watching the story because she, and I'm sorry, her name, the 82-year-old Pat, was, it's one thing to the frustration. I'm sure her daughter was incredibly frustrated having to take the time to make these calls, get the money stuff figured out, because that money's really important. But I could tell she also had this sort of just, hey, everybody, I'm still here. I'm not ready to be gone yet. Don't make me go.
You know, I feel embarrassed to say it didn't dawn on me the emotional impact of what she'd been through until I met with her, because she just lost her husband, and all of a sudden she's getting letters that say, we're sorry to hear about the passing of Pat Christensen. And that I think was hard for her to be like, I'm still here, I'm still alive, and to be treated as she was passed already. I did not think about the emotional impact that would have on her, and it clearly did. And it was frustrating also that it just kept coming back, and that her daughter and her repeatedly had to wait on hold together for these long periods of time.
Yeah, it's not like you call and it's you talk to the person you need to talk to, and it's like, oh, let me just tippy tappy. Oh, all done. It's the onions, right? So you finally get a hold of somebody, and then to your point, then the Social Security payments weren't being handled.
Right. And the second time that her account was suspended, she reached out to us, and our associate producer, Annette, wrote to Social Security, and they were able to get her a direct contact. So basically someone she could reach out to directly without hold times and get answers. And what we found out this time is because Social Security had marked Pat as deceased, Chase Bank heard that she was deceased and had that in their records. So Social Security was sending the payments, but Chase Bank at this point said, no, she's deceased, and sent them back. So this time the problem wasn't with SSA, it was with Chase Bank, and we reached out to them, and they were able to get this fixed out.
But by virtue of the fact that SSA had sent this to Chase Bank.
Exactly. But thankfully, she got those remaining payments. They got 3 more payments after reaching out to us. So they believe this has finally been all figured out.
I mean, I think about it from like Chase Bank's perspective. Certainly, they don't want to be sending out payments to someone who they've been told is deceased.
Right.
So it comes back to that letter. But I was really thinking about, we've talked about this before, what a service Contact 6 is, because her daughter's clearly not someone who's just first resort going, help me out, I can't do anything here, I'm helpless. She's doing all the right things. She's sitting on the calls. They're going and have the in-person appointments. They think it's taken care of. And oh my gosh, here's the problem. Again, now what do we do? And finally they throw up their hands and they go, I don't know what else to do. And I think it was Pat who said, well, I see you on TV. You help people.
She did. She said, I saw one of your commercials, and I said to my family, let's call Jenna Sachs at Contact 6 because I know that they help people with things. And this is actually like a perfect example of where we can be really effective, where if you can just get the attention of the right person at the top, or just cut through that customer service clutter, you can get the right action quickly instead of having to put in all that time. And you're right, she did everything exactly right. If SSA says you're deceased, you're supposed to go to the Social Security office, you're supposed to present your ID, you're supposed to fill out a form, and that should be the end of it. They might give you a letter to show the doctor or other places you might need identification for, but that's it. That's supposed to work. And in other cases, it can have a real domino effect on your life. It can affect your health insurance. It can affect credit cards. If you're younger, it can affect, job applications, applications for loans, issues with banks. There's so many ways you could be denied service by a doctor's office if your insurance says that you're deceased. So that can just snowball from there.
I can't even imagine going to the doctor and I'm like, I'm here for my 9:40 appointment. And they're like, no, it says you're deceased.
I know. And they were the nicest family. I could see them being really patient during this process. But when it just kept coming back after they did everything they were supposed to do, they were frustrated.
Do we know how common this kind of thing is? Because it sounds like this was just maybe a paperwork error on Social Security's end. Her husband passes and somebody mistakenly marks them both as deceased.
I don't know. I know there are other reports, and we've actually handled this issue before. Not a lot, but over the years, I can think of one other story I did with a young woman who was marked as deceased mistakenly. There are other reports online, and there have been people saying that this will occur more as there's more efficiency in the Social Security office and they try to make sure they're not sending out erroneous payments and so on. So there are concerns that it could happen more, but this seems to be a case where her husband was marked as deceased and they somehow, we don't know if it was a human error or a computer error, checked 2 boxes instead of 1 maybe, but her daughter was saying, how can they mark her as deceased without a death certificate, without that paperwork? She found that to be alarming because you have to go through all these steps when people pass away. And the fact that it could have happened, a mistake like that so easily.
That's why I
was
wondered,
concerning to
because
her.
it seems like there should be some sort of backups or some sort of,
Right.
fail-safe in the system that's not just one person checks the box. I recently ordered a pizza where I accidentally unchecked extra cheese and then unchecked all cheese. And I got a pizza. I got a pizza with no cheese on it, and it was dreadful. But I'm thinking that makes sense.
Right.
Ordering pizza, it shouldn't be that simple.
Right.
With Social
To
Security.
kill off somebody.
I will
Yeah.
say,
right.
we reached out to Social Security. They did not respond to me when I asked for comment on this story. When our associate producer reached out to Social Security the first time we got this complaint, they basically said, this is a privacy issue. We can't talk to you about it, but we'll reach out to Pat directly. And they did. So she did get that action, but Social Security won't explain to us what happened.
All right. Well, it's good that you this is one where you got it resolved. Maybe you can't always get pianos back, but at least not yet.
Yeah.
But you got this one resolved. And and it wasn't just a matter of her now being seen as luck. There was a financial benefit here, obviously.
Oh, certainly thousands of dollars were at stake. And that's one thing I noticed about these 2 stories was it wasn't just about the money. These people had emotional issues wrapped up with these financial losses. And that doesn't always happen. Usually people are saying, I deserve this money back. But this case, they were like, this is really hard on me.
Yeah.
And if you watch the story, if you haven't seen the story, Pat has a little bit of a difficulty speaking clearly,
Right,
but she
halting
she very much wanted to get the point
Yeah.
across that, hey, everybody, I'm still alive. I'm not ready to go.
Yeah.
And that's where that emotional piece, there's financial, but there's also that recognition that don't shove me out the door yet. I've got a lot of life to live.
Yeah, it's always helpful when you're doing a story when a person is a really compelling person. I found Pat really compelling, and I found Cassie for the piano story really compelling too.
Absolutely. Well, a couple of really great stories with fascinating and interesting characters. And I just think it once again always brings back the role and the service that Contact 6 plays, because when people are at their wits' end, what do? They go, let's ask Contact 6, because you have the contacts,
Yes.
literally.
We're here. You can always file a complaint on fox6now.com. So go ahead and give it a try.
Well, we are going to take a break. When we come back, we are going to be joined by somebody else who helps an awful lot of people. And that is, and someone, by the way, who's familiar with Contact 6
Yes.
herself. Lisa Schiller from the Better Business Bureau serving Wisconsin will join us to discuss the latest scams targeting Wisconsin consumers. We'll talk to Lisa when we come right back.
Welcome back to Open Record. Joining us now is Lisa Schiller with the Better Business Bureau serving Wisconsin. Lisa's here to discuss the latest scams and consumer warnings. Lisa, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. Pleasure.
Before we get started, I'd love to mention that you actually used to work with the Contact 6 team. How long ago was that?
Oh my goodness. Boy, how long ago was that, Brian? We
I
shared
don't know.
enough.
We had the desks right next to each other for many years. I mean, it's so funny now because I would say that was just a couple of years ago. It's probably been 10. I don't know, maybe.
Oh, more.
Yeah.
No,
maybe
more
Because
than
I
that.
got here 14
Has it
ago.
been more than 10?
Yeah.
Gosh,
15, I
see,
think.
time flies.
I don't know.
I know.
Yeah. Lisa
But
was
we don't age, so that's good.
This is the thing. I just remember listening to Lisa on the phone, and I just thought, you want to, if you've got a problem, if you're a business who's causing trouble, you don't want Lisa Schiller on the phone because she's not going to take anything for. Lisa was a bulldog, and it makes sense you'd be an investigator for the Better Business Bureau because I just loved the tenacity you had in pursuing things on behalf of consumers. It was always fun to watch.
Thank you, Brian. It was a pleasure working with you.
So we'd like to start with some of these scams and consumer warnings. We had mentioned, earlier in other reports on Fox 6 that it's Military Consumer Awareness Month. So I had seen some data that said the FTC said that military consumers lost $584 million to fraud in 2024. Can we talk about why scammers like to target servicemen and women in particular?
Yeah, so sad. Our military members, military consumers, first of all, reported receiving more in loss, median loss than non-military. So that's kind of interesting. And we gather that information from our BBB online scam tracker tool, where people can report scams and fraud. So there are certain factors that make military members and military consumers, their families, a little bit more vulnerable. A little bit more, apt to falling victim to a scam. And that really starts with frequent relocations, right? We know the military moves very often. And for that reason, there are scams that are in relation to moving, such as hiring a moving company. A lot of rogue movers out there, a lot of problems with moving companies. There's also a problem with scams related to housing. So it makes them a little bit more vulnerable when it comes to that as well. And then there is the guaranteed and steady income that the military members and their families have, and scammers know that. So they'll target them for that. As well, really, in the military community, there's some emotional vulnerability involved as well.
Lisa, you here are talking about military members or veterans as
Yes.
consumers themselves. Does this also include people, or things that are sort of looking, like fundraisers and things? I mean, you obviously know we go way back. You brought to Fox 6 many years ago the Double Up for Vets coupon books, where it wasn't necessarily being sold to members of the military, but it was on behalf of people who wanted to give to the military, and people are so willing, so eager to give that things like that can be especially effective.
Yeah, that's a great example, Brian. So years ago, there was a gentleman who was going basically door to door and business to business, soliciting for advertising in a booklet, and taking that money and saying that he was going to be giving it to local veterans, charities, and organizations. That never happened. And, we saw in that situation, which is, again, the perfect example of people opening up their hearts and their wallets because they heard the word veteran. And, we all want to help our veterans, but businesses just gave without doing any checking at all. And, come to find out, he was using the money for himself and not a penny went to a veteran organization in the community or elsewise. So, yes. And, charity scams are another type of scam that targets military consumers and their families as well. We see a lot of similar names, which is why consumers before donating really have to do their homework. Check on that organization. Copy and paste it. Put it in GuideStar. Put it in BBB's charity arm website, give.org.
I think one of the things too, and I think people they feel a little bit of pressure, but then to your point, they hear the word veteran and they want to give money. So if someone goes door to door, how do you handle then if someone's like, oh, give to this thing right now, give me the money for this, but you're not really sure because you want to do the research. So like, what is your advice
That
to someone?
awkward door at the front.
Yeah, where
Yeah.
you feel like I have
Yeah.
to do it because they're right here and they're going to pester me until I do it. So what is your advice to people if that happens?
Yeah, Sarah, that's a good question. I say if anytime anybody comes to your doorstep and has anything to sell or wants a donation, you have to take a step back. Take their information, make sure that they give you, the name, the address, the phone number, all of that necessary information, and do some checking. Tell them you'll be happy to donate, but you need to do a little bit of research first. And, I think once everybody starts doing that, I think we can eliminate some of these scams from happening, really, because we feel that pressure on our doorstep and, we might be uncomfortable. A lot of people are afraid to say no. But, at this day and age, you really have to.
Lisa, I want to ask you about a different issue because the most reported scam to the BBB scam tracker last year was online purchase scams, accounting for 30% of all scams. And this is interesting. Nearly 90% of those who reported the online purchases lost money. So how is this happening in the first place? How are people getting scammed?
Yeah, this is huge, Jenna, and it has been big actually since COVID because more people were jumping online. People that didn't have computers, a lot of older Americans that didn't have laptops were now purchasing them. People were in their homes, businesses were closed, and so they started online shopping, and they have been doing it ever since at record levels. And what's happening really are two things. You asked how it's happening. Number one, people are responding to social media ads that they're seeing. Those pop-ups through Facebook, for example. I get them too, and they catch my attention. They know what our likes are. So, I'll see a pop-up for a cute pair of shoes and I'm ready to click. And then I go, oh my gosh, I have to know who I'm dealing with. I see this reported every day, multiple times a day to our BBB scam tracker. Not even an exaggeration. So aside from that, social media plays a big role, but also people are Googling, which is fine, but you have to be very careful on what links you're clicking on. So, whatever is popular, right now we're in brewer season. So brewer jerseys, brewer ball caps, Packers stuff all year round. People are Googling, Green Bay Packers jersey cheap, or, deal or something. And up pops all of these websites. People are clicking on them and moving forward with the purchase. And they're not paying attention to the website. Where is this company located? Do they have an address? Did you check the address? Because it's not good enough to just show an address, 135 Main Street. You really have to Google that and, see where it leads. Also, there's a lot of mistakes that we find on these online websites. Missing punctuation, misspelled words, text that just doesn't make any sense, and even blank pages. If you click on, contact us, sometimes it'll just be a blank page.
How common are like the Facebook Marketplace kind of things? Because we actually ran into this recently where we were looking for a piece of furniture for a den and found a nice deal online, something that's local or was listed as local. But then as you start asking, hey, I'd like to come by and see it, the person on the other end says, I really need to, I've got a lot of people asking, could you put down a deposit? And that was the red flag for me, not putting any money down on something I haven't seen. It turned out it was in fact a scammer, and we've seen that same photo showing up. But I wonder, is that a key piece of advice? Because I think there's a lot of buying or putting down of money on things you haven't seen in person.
Cars,
online.
for example.
Cars is a huge one. Yeah. That's one where people think, I better get this one. I'm not going to find a deal like this. I better secure it now.
Yeah, absolutely. Facebook Marketplace and, Craigslist. They're all, fantastic for us to buy and sell, but you have to be ever so careful. There's a lot of scams that are breeding on these platforms, and, we can see why. So yeah, to your point, do not put money down. Do not pay in advance if you can help it. And, if you do, remember that there are a lot of payment types that are untraceable. So you want to avoid those. Gift card payments. A lot of scams will ask for, payment by gift card, as we know. Wire transfer. Always pay with a credit card whenever possible, because you'll have, those protections should you need them.
We talked a little bit about the buying the car online. The BBB recently issued another alert just about buying cars online. So that seems crazy to me, but I know people do it. So are there positives and negatives? Like what, how does that all work?
Yeah. So, how did we always shop for vehicles? We went from dealer to dealer, and, we spent hours and hours, and we talked to many different salespeople. We're in 2025 now, and dealers have figured out ways to simplify this process by moving it online. And people are going for it. Of course, there's pros and cons to it. There are pros to buying a car online. You're not as emotionally involved. It's easier to stay detached, when you're chatting with somebody remotely, right? And also, you get everything in writing if you're dealing with the dealership remotely. So you have that, that proof of anything that was promised or anything that was said. But there's also cons, of course, not to be surprising at all. But we're seeing a lot of scams involving online car sales. First of all, unrelated to the real car dealerships online, we're seeing a lot of fake online dealers. So, you have to, look into that URL, make sure that you're on a secure site, HTTPS, that S stands for secure. Make sure that you're dealing with a legitimate company. I mean, a lot of dealerships that are local also sell online. So, there's that to consider as well.
I just can't fathom putting anything down on something that I haven't test driven. You
Sure.
you can't test drive an email. So I want to be in the car, but I guess maybe I'm from the old school. But
when it comes to private car sales online, there can be lots of issues with that too, because you may not get the car's full history, or you may have issues like the person didn't properly transfer the title to you. So that kind of thing can come back to bite you too. So you have to be really careful.
I
when you're
love
doing
online car shopping for being able to cast a wide net, because
Sure.
sometimes you're just stuck with whatever cars are available locally.
Yeah.
But I still want to see the car in person before I'm putting any kind of significant money down. I don't know, maybe it's just me, but it seems like that would be
Yeah.
And then the only other thing we wanted to ask you about, Lisa, today was, we know that it's an active storm season right now in Wisconsin. From May to August, we're most likely to have tornadoes coming through. Will you tell us a bit about storm chasers and advice for people with natural disasters occurring?
Yes, I'm so glad you brought this up, because that's exactly what we see. I feel like we're receiving more crazy weather than ever before through the years, right? Hailstorms. We're hearing about, hurricanes in different parts of the country. Just storms in general, right? Rain, flooding. And that actually brings out storm chasers. And these are individuals or companies that travel to areas that have been affected by these storms, and they may lack the proper licensing. They may do inadequate work. They blow into our neighborhoods and go door to door, often offering repairs. And, we at the Better Business Bureau want to remind people that, again, this is on your doorstep. So you want to take a step back. It could be a vulnerable time. You may have just had storm damage, or somebody's on your porch telling you that you had storm damage. And so it's easy to feel that high pressure to make a quick decision, and of course make payment and sign legal documents, contracts. But you really have to know who you are dealing with. Again, take that step back before you make any decision.
Right, because if they're not from the area, you could have a really hard time tracking them down if you're unhappy with the quality of the work they did.
Or an impossible time tracking them down. And we see that often with our complainants. They'll reach out to us and say, somebody came door to door and pointed at my roof, said he was in the area, and said, there looks like you had hail damage. You may have leaking. This is a problem. And they went ahead with the work that was offered. They made a payment. The company, may have said, I need to go buy supplies, or I need a down payment to start work, and then never returned, and either the work wasn't done or it was not adequately done. And then we say, okay, we'll be happy to help you. Let's file a complaint. That's our first step. They don't know who they hired. They didn't get the company's address, phone number. They don't know who the owner is. They don't know, where they're located. So, and then of course we try to do a little bit of research in the background, try to find out who the company is. But oftentimes these companies change names. They change locations, addresses. Sometimes the addresses are, depending on what type of door-to-door home improvement person is there. They may be using an address that's a local motel. It may be an empty field, or even a campground.
I imagine, I know when these people will come do this door-to-door thing, sometimes what they'll say is, we see you have damage and we can work with your insurance company. Just give us your insurance information and then we'll take care of all the rest.
Or they'll guarantee I can get you 100% coverage.
Yeah.
They can't.
Is that something you hear a lot about?
We do, actually, yes. So our advice is always to contact your insurance company directly, work with your insurance company directly whenever possible. But yeah, we see a lot of companies come in and say that they can be the third party, they can be the intermediary, make it easier for you. They'll deal with your insurance company, solely. So yeah.
You're saying advice is don't hand that over. Just deal with your own insurance company. And then if there's a payment to be made, you can pay the contractor yourself.
Right. You do that. Exactly.
So these are some of the more common things you're seeing. How overall, what is the BBB seeing in terms of? I mean, are complaints up? What's the overall trend right now?
Yeah, complaints are up, and actually our customer reviews are up. So a lot of people are writing customer reviews. We love reviews, positive or negative. We vet and verify all of our customer reviews. And people can write a review rather than file a complaint, depending on the situation. If they're seeking something as a means of a resolution, then that would be better for a complaint. But if they simply want to just state an experience they've had, we recommend writing a customer review. And again, positive or negative, we want to hear those positive stories as well.
Lisa, go ahead.
I was just going to say, and just a reminder to everybody, like if you're going to do business with somebody, someone, a company, whatever, go on BBB's website and just simply type in the name and it pops up. It's a very user-friendly site, and just it's really helpful in seeing
how many of these stories end with when they saw the BBB, they saw the
they
F
went,
ratings.
oh, whoops, the daisy, I already lost money or
beforehand.
whatever. Yeah, so just such a simple thing to do. So
Lisa Schiller with the Better Business Bureau serving Wisconsin, thank you so much for being here on Open Record.
Thank you so much.
We will go off the record when we come right back. And it is time for us to go off the record. This is the part of the podcast where we get a little more casual and have a little fun by answering a question for which Jenna and I have done no preparation. Sarah, what do you have today?
well, let's talk about.
Let's look at my orange sticky
Let's
note.
look at my orange sticky note that I just thought of yesterday.
Yeah.
Brian just came back from a delightful, relaxing vacation in the
I
Northwoods.
did.
How long does it take you to recover from vacation? As in, like, get back into the swing, unpack your bags.
Mentally.
That is precisely why I actually scheduled an extra vacation day this time.
So
because
smart.
I knew I was coming back from a camping type situation where I thought
so
there's going to
much
be
stuff.
smelly, sweaty clothes and other things. And I just want a day to do laundry and get things. And I, of course, made things even worse for myself by having, I thought you were going to ask about this, but I had the mishap of my phone fell into a 500-acre lake in northern Wisconsin.
Is it
and
okay?
It is no. It
No.
is
It's not okay. No.
It is currently investigating the bottom of Stetton
R.I.P.
Lake.
A fish has made it its home.
If we ever recover it, there might be some. We might see what wake boats are doing.
That's
to the
why
bottom
you sent
of
out
that.
the email
That's right.
saying my new phone
Yes.
number.
That's right.
Got
I've got
it.
a
No, my
temporary-
favorite email was Kale emailed the news managers and said, Brian had a mishap with his phone on vacation. And
Yes.
first thing I thought of was, oh no, it's in the water.
I know this wasn't the question, but the moment
Yes.
I'm just holding the phone, nothing nefarious is happening. I'm standing on the edge of a pontoon boat, and then we hit
First
a little
row.
bit of a bump, and there's that fumble.
Yep.
And the moment that it's
And your
tumbling in
hands
the
stop
air,
working.
and you think, oh, it's going to land right on the edge, I'll be okay. And then I see it hit the edge and plop into the water, and everything that was fun became not fun.
And then you're
anymore.
like stressed out, and you're like, I just want to go home.
So it
Yeah.
was all the more important, back to your question,
Yes,
that I had
sorry.
that day because
To,
I
like,
like the extra day.
Recombobulate.
I definitely need to schedule at least a day. But yeah, mentally, even after that day, it can take a minute. Yeah, luckily, we usually have so many emails that you can spend a long amount of time
Yes.
just going through emails, and
Yeah.
that can
I
kind
did
of
that
acclimate you.
on the day off just so that I could come back
Yes,
today
not
because
feeling
today's my first day
stressed.
back.
Yes, not
I
feeling
didn't want to
stressed.
be as stressed today, so I spent the time just deleting the emails that weren't for me.
Right.
I've also
Ugh.
started taking off a day before we leave for vacation
that's
because
smart.
then I'm like,
I did that too.
I can really focus on like
Packing.
and making sure we're going to Door County next week and
Fun.
we're leaving midweek. But I'm like, you know what? I'm taking that buffer day on the front end. And I feel already like less stressed knowing that I have a full day that, and the kids are going to be gone so that I can get everything together and to go.
Right.
you
I
do the
also
same?
clean the house because I
You wanna
hate
come
coming
home
home
to
to,
the-
a dirty
yeah.
house.
Yeah.
Like it feels so nice to come back and be like, well, this is clean, and I
Yes.
feel relaxed the moment I walk in.
We're taking the trash out before you leave.
Yes.
There is just something about like fresh garbage bag
Yeah.
and, just clean counters.
You know what I did though? I just going back to an earlier open record question. I brought 2 pair of underwear for every day.
Good job.
I did.
Well,
yeah.
you were also like outside a lot and doing
Well, that's what I
outdooring
knew.
type
Yeah,
things.
we were
so
like doing bike rides. We played pickleball, by the way.
Yeah.
Played pickleball. and
that's
that
the
was
sweaty
fun.
activity.
Yeah, it was fun, but you get sweaty.
Yes.
So yeah, it's hard work. But if anyone who says pickleball is like just easier tennis? No, it's hard.
No, it
work.
looks intense. You have a
It was-
smaller racket.
And I was playing with, by the way, someone who is now actually going to be in the Senior Olympics in Des Moines for pickleball.
That's intense.
yeah, and that's why I
couldn't hang.
lost a lot. Not very
And
good.
then lost your phone.
Yeah, and lost that and two. Lost that as well. Anyway, all right, we're out of time. We will wrap things up when we come right back. That is all the time we have for Open Record this week. If you have a topic you would like us to discuss on Open Record, an issue you think we should investigate for Fox 6 News, or a way to get my phone off the bottom of 7 Mile Lake,
Don't
please
call
send us
him.
an email to fox6investigators@fox.com. As always, thank you to the people who make this podcast possible. Sarah, Jenna, Dave Machuda running the video switcher today, and our chief photographer, Kale Zimney. I am Brian Polson. We'll be back next week.